whether it is nothing more than a two-dimensional character that will cease to exist when the writers kill him off or the show gets canceled. Will this character succeed or fail in his bid for freedom? Will he continue in his quest or change course? Does it really matter? Tune in tomorrow to find out. Andrew was very still, very thoughtful. Wisely, he was not insulted, not taking things personally. He was listening, absorbing, but not countering or defensive. I was being a bit of an ass, I suppose, over-explaining, overstretching already tenuous analogies, just trying to keep myself amused, I guess, but also testing ways of saying things and over-saying things. So, I continued, you, Andrew, are both in the soap opera and of the soap opera. You desire to break out of the soap, and that desire is the dangling carrot that, as actors say, provides your motivation, which in turn provides the dramatic impetus for many tragicomic, Andrew-centric episodes. And eventual success? He asked. I waved a hand dismissively. Oh, yeah, sure. You can't manage to avoid your own true nature forever. It's a wonder that anyone manages it at all. Andrew frowned. You make it sound like enlightenment is... what? Well, like nothing. Unimportant. Like it's... beside the point, I supplied. Imagine that you're watching a soap opera on television, but you have the power to step into it. 1 minute you're watching a goofy TV show. The next minute, you're in a hospital room, visiting a character who is dying of brain cancer. It's real to him. He's in the pit of despair. But to you, he's just an actor playing a role. Nothing is really at stake. How much genuine empathy do you have for his plight? But he's just a fictional character. I stared off into the distance and waited. I'm just a fictional character, he said flatly. I'm the one with brain cancer. You've stepped into my soap opera. This is a good lesson, a fun one. Analogy-wise, I could make it a Broadway production of Hamlet instead of a soap opera, but that would tend to glorify these fictions rather than trivialize them. The soap opera analogy is very succinct in making the 2 points that Andrew and I have been toying with. 1, that Andrew himself was a fictional character, and 2, that all importance is illusory. But there was another point to touch on while we were in the neighborhood. And who created your character? I asked him. You mean, who made me what I am? Who is the author of you? Well, to some degree, I am, Andrew replied. Okay, then who is the author of the you that you say is, to some degree, the author of you? He gave that some thought. My true self? Oxymoron. There is no true self. Truth and self are mutually exclusive. This is like the nature versus nurture debate about how we develop. Okay. So there's really no answer. Sure there is. What? Not you. The author of you is not you. So I'm... what? What does that make me? I don't know. What does it matter? Well, obviously, he began, but fell silent. There's nothing obvious about it, I explained. There's no comprehending the vastness and complexity of the influences that go into creating the false self. A redundant term, but that's not a problem because there's no benefit to comprehending it either. There is a benefit, however, to realizing that who you are has little or nothing to do with you. It may be difficult to imagine not taking yourself personally, but it can be done when you see clearly that who you are has little or nothing to do with you. Me who? Well said. We sat silently for a while, each with our own thoughts. I spent the time reviewing my own words for effectiveness and possible improvement. Andrew, understandably, spent those few quiet moments seeking refuge and stability in his Buddhist teachings, which I found out when he asked something pretty unrelated to what we had been discussing. But what about suffering? The Buddha said, "Stop." If I allowed students to steer these dialogues with their questions, all of our time would be spent going in every imaginable direction but forward. Students, quite naturally, think that it's important to understand. They think that it's vital that their information be correct and precise. They think that this is like school, where you have to understand one thing before you can understand the next thing. But all that is about knowing, and this is unknown. All this so-called knowledge is exactly what stands between the seeker and the sought. I can certainly understand their perspective in all this, but I am always amazed when I see other teachers of this stuff letting students drag them uphill and down dale with questions that don't advance the cause. Waking up isn't a theoretical subject one masters through study and comprehension. It's a journey one makes, a battle one fights. Teachers want to be popular and appear wise, so they answer whatever questions anyone thinks to ask, as if they were teaching the next generation of teachers, rather than helping people wake up. And having said that, I am also constrained to say that this journey, this battle, has yet to even begin for Andrew. His many years of meditation and spiritual education do nothing to alter the fact that he has yet to take the first step on his own journey. The first step is the main thing. That's what everything I teach is really about. Take the first step, and the rest will most assuredly follow. You can traipse about the stage playing a spiritual role, and you can meditate and renounce and be selfless and earn merit and burn karma year after year, lifetime after lifetime, and still not take that first step. That really sums up the state of awakening in the West, where spirituality is a recent cultural transplant with many intoxicating blossoms but no established root system. In her book Halfway Up the Mountain, The Error of Premature Claims to Enlightenment, Mariana Kaplan has this to say about the siren song of enlightenment. The most common, widely held fantasy about enlightenment is that it is freedom from suffering, the transcendence of pain and struggle, the land of milk and honey, a state of perpetual love, bliss, and peace. Enlightenment represents the collectively shared dream of an idealized and perfect world of pure beauty and joy. It is not only New Age fantasy, it is the secret wish of all people. It is our shared dream of salvation, but it is only a fantasy. In short, like most spiritual seekers, Andrew never signed up for enlightenment at all, but for a heaven-on-earth fantasy called, in this case, nirvana. The question is, once disabused of the fantasy, does the seeker's enthusiasm automatically transfer to the reality? In other words, if you ordered a hot fudge sundae with whipped cream and a cherry, would you be just as happy if the waiter gave you a poke in the eye with a sharp stick? Probably not. So now Andrew wanted to throw the Buddha at me. But I have no use for the Buddha. And though he didn't realize it yet, neither did Andrew. Suffering is irrelevant, I told him. Compassion is irrelevant. To begin with, neither one of us has the slightest idea what the Buddha said, because he didn't write it down and get it notarized. And since he's not here to explain, we're on our own. Andrew was wide-eyed at this heresy. I sensed that he was thinking about getting up and leaving. This is good news. What I'm saying is that you don't have to rely on the highly suspect teachings of someone who's been dead for thousands of years. You can rely on yourself. If Prince Siddhartha made it on his own, you can too, right? The Buddha was just some guy who got serious and figured it out for himself. So maybe that's his real teaching, that you can figure it out for yourself. Maybe the point isn't that he was some sort of deity or Superman, but that he wasn't, that he was just a guy like you or me. Andrew was rocking back and forth slightly, agitated. As to suffering, I continued, forget it. It's a non-issue. Suffering just means you're having a bad dream. Happiness means you're having a good dream. Enlightenment means getting out of the dream altogether. Words like suffering and happiness and compassion are just bags of rocks. Eventually, you'll have to set them down if you want to keep going. Andrew sat motionless, his inner turmoil obvious. Nobody likes to have their cherished beliefs dumped on, but dumping on beliefs is the name of the game. We sit quietly for several minutes before Andrew steers us back to an earlier topic. So we can't realize our Buddha nature by conducting ourselves in a Buddha-like manner. The Tao says that the sage walks in the world but leaves no footprints. This is just another way of saying in the world, but not of the world. What the Tao doesn't say is that the unawakened person who wishes to become a sage must only travel in such a way that no mark is left on the ground. But can you imagine if a sect of anal Taoists read this passage as a directive to never disturb soil or dust, to never bend a blade of grass? It would be ludicrous, but no less ludicrous than many of the things people do to make believe they are the thing they hope to become. There's no point in acting like someone who is already where you want to be. The point is to get there yourself. The way to become a sage isn't to act like one. Become a sage first, and then you pick up all the sagely characteristics free and easy. The misconception about mimicking enlightenment as a way of becoming enlightened can be seen everywhere. If you want to be an enlightened guy, the thinking goes, act like an enlightened guy. If vampires really walked the earth, and I'm not saying they don't, there would be teachers and classes where you could sign up if you wanted to become a vampire yourself, as I suppose some people would. If the teacher were a vampire himself, he might just bite everyone and swap fluids or whatever, and presto changeo, they're all vampires. But if the teacher were just a regular human, and not really a vampire, then you might find him handing down specific rules for his students to follow. Don't go out in the sunlight. Don't eat garlic or drink holy water. Don't drive wooden stakes through your heart, and so forth. And vampire wannabes would stand in line and pay their money to hear it. Then they'd return to their lives and struggle to follow their teacher's instructions in the hope that, by doing so, they would eventually achieve vampirehood. But, as we all know, that's not how you become a vampire. That's how you become a Fruit Loop. It's the same thing with the non-attachment and the in the world but not of the world business. If you just want to be happy and acting like a vampire makes you happy, then super, that's definitely the thing to do. But if you want to become a vampire, then wearing black and getting your canines capped isn't going to do the trick. Another point Andrew raised that's worth considering here had to do with the edict, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. From the sound of it, this too is a subject of ongoing debate between Andrew and his fellow Buddhists. I said, enjoying fond recollections. I didn't know what that meant when I first heard it either. But you do now? Andrew asked.